Hey kids, this is Em. How you doing? You got to have goals, right? You know, we're all encouraged to have goals, dreams, whatever it is that we, something we're going after, and we have to measure our progress towards them. What are you doing to get there? You evaluate your results for success or failure, kind of alter your approach, and get back on track. I could certainly use some more of that in my life. But what if you weren't really sure where you were going, and you're just kind of plodding through life with no real clear goals or direction? Does that sound familiar to anybody? Anyhow, this video is going to be a little bit different than the normal video I make. I mean, yeah, I do talk about mechanics and resolution type approaches, from time to time. But this one's going to be kind of like my off-the-cuff reactions to a different way to handle actions resolution proposed by Angel Judenfoots, and specifically she made in the comments of the video I just did on skills and auto success, auto failure, auto wash, all that kind of good stuff. And I found them kind of intriguing, and I'd like to hear what you think about this as well. So hopefully I do a good enough job of explaining it. So she's involved in designing a game, as are many people, and I'm not sure if this is really a new concept. It's framed or presented to me in a way that I've never really heard it. So it's definitely novel to me. So I'm curious to try this in a game session, not necessarily in a game that I normally play, but just use this in a session or two and see what happens, because it's really kind of intriguing to me. Even though Angel and I have radically different preferences when it comes to games, still I enjoy talking to people that look at things a lot differently than I do. And I'm not against trying things, especially ones that sound a little intriguing. So forgive me, I'm going to look back and forth to this other monitor because I had to write quite a few notes for this, and see if that works better than reading off paper. Anyhow, normally we think of actions in a role-playing game, whether it's a conflict or just here you are and you want to do something, as this consists of the player stating an action and your intention. So you say something like, well, okay, I run through the door, I try to slam it before the guy that's chasing me reaches it, and then I try to block it with a dresser and whatever furniture, other furniture's in the room, so he can't get in, or at least to buy me some time so I can get out the window and go down the fire escape and get out of here. So we've just framed, okay, this is what I'm going to try to do, and this is my intention. This is why I'm going to do it. This is the outcome I'm looking for. And then, if dice are required, and skills or attributes or whatever involved, then we figure out what we need to do, add this, subtract that, and we invoke the mechanic of the game. And so then these dice have authority over the outcome in terms of success or failure, and to what degree, depending on if a game has a degree of success or failure in it. And then it's up to the player and or the game master, if you watched my other videos recently talking about that dialogue, and to narrate what does that success or failure look like. We've got the outcome, what exactly does it look like? But what if a game handled things like that dramatically differently? And so that's what we're going to take a look at now. So we're starting from a different premise entirely. So here's the deal. As she was explaining to me, sometimes we do things with one intention, but we get a result that's really not what we were after, but it can still be advantageous in a different way in that situation. So she states that her intent, no pun intended here, because we're going to talk about intentions or the lack thereof, is to redefine why these die rolls happen in the first place, making them not necessarily about success or failure, but about consequences and outcomes. It sounds like it's just semantics, but it's a little bit different, and you'll get it as I keep on talking about it. But putting things a little bit differently, if you divorce intention and outcome from one another, and you look at the actions that the characters take in a more holistic manner, I guess would be the right word, then you're free to frame the results in ways other than being a success or a failure. And part of her rationale and a premise, if I understand it correctly, is that often we take actions where we don't know all the possibilities in advance. That makes sense, and more importantly to the vibe that she seems to be trying to achieve, she wants to avoid the declaration of intention prior to rolling. As to her, it creates a narrow view and ignores the fact that many people figured out what they want to do in the middle of doing it. They don't quite start out with a clear intention. Like when you're halfway through there, you're like, oh, okay, I think I want this to happen. And I can certainly relate to that from time to time, even in my own life, as I plod through life, directionless sometimes. So, in a nutshell, the procedural mechanic that she's proposing is following. The player states what ability or abilities are going to be used in a situation. It could be a conflict, could just be kind of situation. And what the abilities are, they could be your actual attribute scores. It could be specific skills. It could be, I guess talents, or somebody's a hacker, somebody's, a magician, somebody's, an outdoors person. Somebody knows how to drive a car, whatever it happens to be, or race car driver, who the heck knows. And they also have the option at this point to state what the start of their action is going to look like, or they can leave that blank. And and she makes the point to me too, as we discuss this back and forth, that the ability they use and the circumstances, et cetera, who the character is, that often informs what that commencing that action is going to look like. If you get into a car and you're probably going to grab the steering wheel, all that kind of good junk. Now, at that point, if it needed, then the dice determine how many positive and negative results, actually occur. And I'm not sure, what her intent is with that. I don't know. She talks about die pools a little bit, back and forth as we talk. But maybe it could just be a bunch of positive dice, green dice, and a bunch of, I can't even hold here, maybe a bunch of negative dice, And maybe it's just, I don't know, you can use the same dice and something's a success or something's a failure. I'm not really sure. Or, in terms of, not success or failure, but positive or negative. That's important. That's an important distinction. See, I caught myself already because I'm used to saying stuff like that. So then, the dice determine how many positive and negative outcomes result. So maybe you do all this, you roll all these dice, and you figure out, oh man, I've got, 2 positive and 1 negative outcome. As I try to do this, not even sure. I just invoke this ability in this particular situation. Then, at that point, the player narrates what those outcomes look like. They narrate what the positive outcomes look like, and they narrate what the negative outcomes look like as well. And she gave one example where you're shooting at somebody, and maybe you get some positive and some negative outcomes. So maybe you hit them, maybe you wing them a little bit with a gun, but you've got some negative outcomes as well. So maybe it goes through them and actually hits somebody else, and it's a good guy. Or maybe the hot casing from your gun shoots back, lands in the collar of your shirt, and starts to burn your neck. And so at the next turn, or however you want the game handles it, you're a little bit distracted because you've got this burning hot thing on your neck that you're trying to get off of it, and your attention has been diverted from the more immediate dangers of this other person, probably really mad at you that you just shot them. And then at this point, intention is entirely removed from the equation. And thus, it's not limiting the outcomes imagined prior to the roll. It's only after the roll the player gets to decide that. That's kind of interesting to me, because at that point, you're really not stating what you want to do. You're waiting, seeing like, well, what, how many positives and negatives show up, and then you fill in the blanks. And then as a player, you've got to do that. Now, this is, certainly for me, like, my gut level or like off the cuff reactions when I read all this is like, other than the fact that, that's interesting, that's kind of neat. I wonder what that would look like, and I want to kind of know, what the dice mechanic would be, because I love all that kind of stuff. Very improv theater. It's certainly not for all games, and certainly not for all people. But I'd like to try it just to see what it would look like. And definitely the right people would be essential. Definitely need some very creative people with the ability to think on their feet, think outside the box, and, just not afraid to have some fun and kind of stretch out a little bit. I have some people in mind I'd love to try that with. Sometimes thespians can really kind of get irritating. No offense if you're a thespian, I think I have some thespian friends on here on the brigade, but, there's some, but they're great at that kind of stuff. And sometimes it takes me a little while to amp up to get to their level, and I have some other friends who are just really great at that kind of stuff. The biggest drawback or potential problem I could see, that's potential, is that, I think what it would do is it has the potential to remove accountability, because you can always reinvent what your intention was on the fly, and because of that, you essentially remove your accountability to the other players, to yourself, and if I can say, be so bold as to say, to the integrity of the fiction, to a degree. This of course assumes that you had an intention to begin with, but my suspicion is, maybe just I'm filtering it through like how I normally game, is you probably had some kind of intention. You probably, no matter what the situation was, conflict or no, you were invoking an ability. You probably had some kind of idea, ballpark what you want to have happen, in the back of your head. But you don't have to necessarily state it. You're not accountable for that. You can then just kind of imagine these things on the fly. However, I will say this, as I was thinking about that, Druidenfoots' point, that people only tend to have a vague idea of what they're going for in a lot of situations and kind of make stuff up on the fly as they're doing it. That's a valid, I don't know if it's a counter-argument to mine, but at least it's something to consider. So, like I said, not for all people, not for all games. Not sure if it's for me, so to speak, but I find it interesting. I definitely something I'd like to try. So what do you think? How does that approach to, not even sure, it's not really task resolution, but just to situations. How does that grab you? What are your gut level reactions? What are your off the cuff reactions? I'd really like to hear this. And I talked to Angel, said, is it okay if I make a video about this? She said, sure. So I'm sure she'd like to hear your reactions as well.